I would like to tell you we will be beginning our session in about 3 minutes. I'd invite those who are sitting in the back to come forward. You will be able to see the slides better and participate in our question and answer period. So please feel free to come up, and we'll be beginning in just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We delayed just a minute for the ambassador to come, and I understand there's some important negotiations going on, but he is on his way. So we will begin and ask him to give his remarks when he does arrive. I'm Richard Delaney. I'm happy to be your moderator this morning, or this afternoon already. I am the Senior Policy Advisor of the Center for Coastal Studies in the United States. I also am the Executive Director of a small nonprofit called the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, trying to motivate people in many sectors in that area to deal with climate change. But my most relevant title today is as a member of the Board of Directors of the Global Ocean Forum. So my official welcome to all of you. My thanks to you for choosing this session this afternoon, and of course to our distinguished panelists from whom you will hear in a few moments. Today's presentation is called Coordination and Collaboration Towards Ocean Blue NDCs. And I'm sure all of you know those are nationally determined commitments with regard to climate mitigation and adaptation. First, before we get started, I'd also like to express our thanks and gratitude to our collaborators and our partners, the government of Fiji, the Global Ocean Forum, and its affiliate, the International Coastal and Ocean Organization, Réseau Océan Mondial, and if my French is poor, that in English is the World Ocean Network, and the Nassauca Centrale Nationale de la Mer in France. Also partnering with us is the Urban Coast Institute from Monmouth University in the United States, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, the French Biodiversity Agency, the Center for Coastal Studies, and Acadia University in Nova Scotia, Canada. So once again, thank you to our partners, thank you to our members. Just a very brief word of introduction to the topic. As you know, the NDCs, nationally determined contributions, are commitments toward the mitigation and adaptation goals of the Paris Agreement. Together, the NDCs are intended to help achieve the mitigation necessary to keep the global temperature increase below the 1.5 and 2 degree Celsius warning limits. Interestingly and importantly, many of the NDCs from ocean nations and small island nations and island nations also present an opportunity to promote and accelerate ocean-based climate change actions. So that's where our focus is this morning. There are 148 nations that are either bordering on an ocean or an island in itself. That's of the 196 nations that signed the Paris Climate Accord. Those in a recent survey done in 2021 by the Ocean Conservancy, which did a survey of the NDCs at that time, they found that of the 62 submissions, 54 were from coastal countries, and they each one included at least one element in their NDC. So that's encouraging, and it's exciting to be able to address both ocean management issues and climate issues simultaneously with a sustainable approach. So that will be the focus today. We'll ask our panelists to share their experience, some of their constraints that they have found in implementing those NDCs, the needs to move forward, and other wisdoms that they can share with us as we go. So the agenda is as follows. We will ask for a government perspective on incorporating ocean climate action into the NDCs, prospects and opportunities. And when His Excellency Mr. Satanya Prasad arrives, he will speak. In the meantime, we are very pleased to have, and I'll introduce her formally in a minute, two speakers from the financing perspective. And then we'll move on. I'll ask one of our partners, one of our colleagues, Indu Hiwawasan, to be the moderator for a Q&A with those first three speakers. And then we'll move on to the section of the agenda that will be looking to examples for collaboration and coordination. So that's a brief preview of the agenda. I still don't see the ambassador, so I will go next to Ms. Stephanie Bouzigis-Eshman, who is the Secretary General of the French Facility for Global Environment. Stephanie will speak about issues that illustrate or examples that illustrative initiatives on nature-based and other coastal sustainable solutions and links between ocean preservation and climate. Stephanie, your Secretary.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. First, I would like to thank the organizers of this side event for inviting me and providing me with the opportunity to share experience from the French Facility for Global Environment. Ocean is key for climate. Partnerships are key for climate. And the title of this side event summarizes this ambition. So for those of you who may not know the French Facility for Global Environment, I have the pleasure to represent. It is a public financial instrument created by the French government in 1994 after the Rio Earth Summit. We financially support innovative pilot projects acting for the global environment preservation on one side and for the sustainable local development on the other side in developing countries. We expect these projects to generate environmental but also social and economic benefits. We don't finance innovation for innovation. What we are looking for is to share experiences and lessons learned from the projects we are supporting and to disseminate good practices and solutions. We support projects to illustrate solutions answering to the Convention's commitments regarding biodiversity, climate change, international waters, land degradation, and even the ozone layer and chemical pollution. For 28 years now, we have financed 400 projects with almost 450 million euros in more than 120 countries, and the large majority of them working for adaptation, mitigation, and for convergence of climate and biodiversity. Ocean and coastal areas are among the key thematics for the FFEM. These ecosystems are on one side, obviously you know that, very affected by human activities and climate change, and on the other side, these ecosystems are part of the solution, playing a huge role for climate regulation, mitigation, and adaptation. So what we support is mainly two types of activities on this regard that could serve NDCs, mitigation, and adaptation. First, we support several projects for coastal resilience and human population resilience based on nature-based or ecosystem-based approaches, restoring mangroves, for instance, or seagrasses. And in particular, in the region of the Pacific region, we finance with the French Development Agency the Rescue Project for restoration of ecosystem services and adaptation to climate change in the Pacific, coordinated by the Pacific Community. The objective was to build resilience to climate change through integrated coastal management and innovative economic instruments. The Rescue Project was implemented at a regional scale with pilot sites in Fiji and Vanuatu, and it was based on three principles. First, a strategic planification. Second, the choice of no-regret solutions, meaning adequate solutions for a large scope of evolution, potential evolution with regard to the climate change, and reversible solutions. And guess what? The project never had to choose between nature-based solutions and gray solutions. Nature-based solutions were always considered the best way forward for instance, for the coastline in Fiji. Just once, an hybrid solution was opted. The Pacific region can be very proud of this project, and we now try to go beyond with a new project called Payback Plus, supported with the Kiwa initiative and coordinated by the SPREP. I told you we support two main types of activities. We also support work on oceans governance. For instance, we support a project implemented by the Tara Foundation that was key in the recognition of the importance of the planktonic ecosystems for both their role in the carbon storage and in fisheries management. Beyond the knowledge of these ecosystems, the objective of such a project is to inform public decisions and to promote national, regional, and international protection frameworks with regard to the ocean management and governance, in order to serve at the same time objectives against climate change, biodiversity loss, and for sustainable development. Concretely, from that, we can identify ocean areas to be protected because of their key role in climate regulation and fisheries management. Here are some examples of solutions that I am pleased to share today, and I think we will have some more examples to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary General. I apologize for the brief introductions of you and the rest. I would ask the audience to note that in the online version of our agenda for the side event, there are all the biographies, which are impressive and extensive and worth reviewing from our panel. So again, please take advantage of that online. I'm going to back up one step because we are honored and pleased that His Excellency Mr. Satyendra Prasad, the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Fiji to the United Nations in New York, and Fiji's non-resident High Commissioner to Canada, has been able to join us at this point. I know you must have an extremely busy agenda here, Mr. Ambassador, but we're pleased that you could offer us a government perspective on incorporating ocean climate action into the NDCs, prospects and opportunities. So the floor is yours, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Chair and fellow panelists and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me on this panel and share some of my comments, and also for putting this excellent event or side event together on something that is so consequential for the planet and for all of us. Our oceans define and are defined by the climate. They are fragile and they're sensitive to climate disruption and actions. And we need to also know that ocean provides the best solution, or one of the best solutions that we have to keeping within 1.5. While the actions we are currently taking to reduce greenhouse gases, to improve resilience, and to adapt to climate change have indirect implications for oceans, there are also many activities that are required to address ocean threats directly. And I got the last bit of the Kiwa presentation. That's an excellent case study in Fiji. Whether it will be through revised management strategies to reduce the stress on fisheries, coastal adaptation measures that utilize creative nature-based solutions, or national development plans where you bring all of these pieces together to buffer our ocean from the impacts of development, including ocean-based outcomes and objectives, are vital to ensuring our response to climate change is holistic, effective, and potentially transformative. This means that high-level climate commitments, including those within our NDCs, should seek to address ocean and climate issues. And today, only 70 countries have a blue component in their NDCs. It is a great start. There's another 70 or so oceanic states who have yet to offer and oceans a blue component in their NDCs. And we hope that by 2018, all countries with ocean or large lake systems and rivers are able to bring the ocean, river, and lakes perspective into their NDCs, and the NDCs become more credible overall. The climate crisis requires broad, holistic, joined-up perspective where we bring ocean and the environment and biodiversity and the nature in an integrated way. No NDC is credible or worth its salt if it doesn't bring these pieces together. Nature is our best way of fighting climate action. It has to be at the heart of climate action. So what we are doing to keep these vital ocean systems functional is obviously not nearly enough. The IPCC's sixth assessment report is before us, and I invite you to take a look at it. It is code red in all its vectors, across all its outcomes. We are in code red, and not only in code red, we are now in overtime zone. In Fiji's case, we have increased the scope of our updated NDCs to better address ocean-related adaptation and mitigation objectives. Through our NDC and our national ocean policy, we will designate 30% of our EEZ within a 100% managed area by 2030. And that is a commitment that is backed by many other things, including a commitment to have a moratorium on seabed mining. It is Fiji's views that many parties have the opportunity to use their NDCs to further enhance ocean governance, recognizing how important ocean is and what a great tool it is in our efforts to fight climate change. Conserving carbon reservoirs, quantifying carbon reservoirs and carbon sinks, working through restoration of mangroves. And this morning at an event, we heard from Colombia how important mangroves are to reducing the impact of disasters on coastal communities. We see this ocean and climate change dialogue as a home for cross-cutting considerations and discussions that are needed to scale up impactful ocean-related climate action through the UNFCCC process. We, of course, need to fill the gaps in science, in finance, in technology, in capacity building across all of these areas. And despite the progress and ambitions, there are specific questions that when it comes to implementation. And this is an implementation COP. One of the most fundamental building blocks and building pieces for implementation is finance, and we need to get the finance piece right. The ocean provides for all of us. It may sound rhetorical. Every second breath that we take comes from the ocean, and it provides the Blue Pacific, of which Fiji is a part, provides about 50% of the world's tuna and fisheries resources. It provides a fundamental and outsized environmental service to humanity, not only to us directly. Its ability to continue to provide this service cannot be taken for granted. It is the most sensitive to the minutest of temperature rise. And in Fiji and in much of the Pacific, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot conceive of a future where the ocean can continue to provide these services in a beyond 1.5 Celsius world. 1.5 degree temperature increase is so fundamental for the ocean to continue to be stable and be an integral part of our climate action. And it is very important that we all walk away from Sharm el-Sheikh by keeping 1.5 alive, because on that rests the integrity of the ocean. On that probably rests every second breath that we take as human beings. That's how high the stakes are. So by the time we meet in COP28, it is our expectation that that ocean would have been mainframed onto the COP agenda, and that all countries have offered a cohesive blue component in their NDCs, and that we are able to thereafter track the progress that all countries are making in ocean conservation and restoring stability on our planet. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for sharing those thoughts. But more importantly, thank you for your leadership, not only on behalf of Fiji, but on behalf of all coastal and island nations. That's very important, and we thank you for that. Hopefully you'll have a few minutes to hear two more perspectives in the panel from the financial perspective on how to implement ocean-based NDCs, and the next of which will come from Mr. Matthew Bray, who's the co-founder and CEO of Brayfoil Technologies, a representative startup from Ocean Hub Africa. Matthew, please join us.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me today, and thank you for looking at a slightly different perspective of this conversation. I'm wearing two hats today, one of the company that I founded and I run, which is called Brayfoil Technologies. We work on applying biomimicry to the way that aerostructures work, like aircraft wings or wind turbine blades, and we're applying that particularly in the area of wind turbine blades in order to produce the next generation of more effective, efficient devices, particularly for use offshore, so either floating offshore or fixed. And in that process, we've raised funding from the South African government, we've raised funding from the UK government, and we've also raised funding from venture capital funds focused on ocean and on climate technology, like Catapult VC out of Norway. The other hat that I'm wearing is for Ocean Hub Africa, and that's an accelerator that I was a part of in South Africa, which is intended to accelerate blue economy-based businesses in Africa and have a positive impact on ocean NDCs in particular. So the points that I really want to cover are looking at collaboration and effective deployment of projects to achieve NDCs is reliant on developing a great ecosystem of projects, right? Either that's in the public sector or in the private sphere, startups, people that are passionate about the space in order to achieve the goals that are set out. How do we then nurture those businesses and get them through into growth and to being self-sustaining and to continue to achieve these goals? And then how do we deploy solutions that are already proven through these means? So I'll start firstly with some experience that we've found or that I found firstly in the incubation side, so the Ocean Hub Africa side. Their mission is really to accelerate blue economy businesses in Africa, help them scale and create a platform from which to grow. And that has happened across 4 cohorts so far, one of which was focused primarily on plastic recycling. And their vision long term is to become an incubator of incubators on the African continent. So allow that model to scale across Africa and create local solutions to so many of the problems around plastic pollution, nature-based solutions and blue carbon solutions, as well as more wildcard solutions like ours in terms of technology development. They're also raising an ocean fund, so looking at creating a fund to invest directly in these businesses. And they also host the Ocean Innovation Africa Forum every year alongside the Ocean Race in Cape Town, which is happening next year in February. So that was really instrumental in our growth. It allowed us to access capital locally as well as internationally. And we work in a very interesting space. So we work in the hardware development side of wind turbine technologies. And why is this important for ocean health and ocean NDCs? Offshore wind is essentially the largest deployment of renewable energy in the oceans. So it's the biggest interaction between the energy systems and the oceans and the coastlines, right? So how can we deploy that in a way that is more effective, more efficient, and has less of an impact on the coastlines? That transition is happening with the shift from fixed bottom offshore wind through into floating offshore wind, which has less of an impact on the actual coastal biodiversity. It's further away from shore, but that needs to become cost competitive, and that's really what we're focusing on. So, right now over 57 gigawatts of wind capacity has been deployed globally, producing over 200 terawatt hours of energy. So it's a massive area for growth. Some constraints that we found, one is mandate, so finding funding and support for our work in the African ecosystem has been difficult. So government support has been massively important, and also framing of these projects. I think that ocean projects and nature-based solutions, as well as our type of hardware focused on oceans, can be framed in the broader climate narrative, and there's so much investment and so much momentum in the climate venture capital space globally, particularly in the global north, and I think that a lot of that can flow to the global south and to large ocean states as well if the framing is done correctly on that. And then really support for entrepreneurs is one of the other things that we found to be a constraint and a need, and Ocean Hub Africa have been fantastic in that. And then I would also encourage you to, if you're interested in the space, look at 1,000 Ocean Startups. It is a network of VC funds, incubators, and startups that are growing ocean solutions and ocean-based solutions. That's 1,000 Ocean Startups. And they have an Ocean Impact Navigator tool, which is built to help funds and policymakers determine and measure impact in their investments. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for having me, and enjoy the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you, Madam Secretary General. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your remarks. We now have an opportunity to engage in some questions and answers, and I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, Dr. Indu Hiwawasam, who is not only a board member of the Global Ocean Forum, but president of Sustainable Oceans and Coasts, LLC. So she will moderate an opportunity for a follow-up discussion with our first three panelists for about 10 to 15 minutes. Indu, please.
Thank you, Richard, and I'm happy to moderate this Q&A session. So you may ask a question from any of the speakers on this panel, and please mention your name and affiliation before you ask the question for the record. I'm opening the floor. Well, the first speaker, Honorable Ambassador, spoke about the NDCs and the commitments from the different nations. And the second speaker mentioned the coastal and biodiversity initiatives. And thirdly, we heard about the financing perspectives. So all three are very, very important topics. So I invite questions. Please.
Hello. Hi, my name is Hazel. I am from Guatemala, and I'm currently part of the working group for the NDCs in my country in the marine and coastal areas. And it is a bit of a struggle to push to make the financing and the efforts not only in adaptation, because I know in developing countries they talk about so much of the importance of adaptation, but I truly believe that the ocean is the best way that we can tackle climate change, and we need to invest as well in mitigation strategies. So what can you tell me, since I have the amazing opportunity to have a voice in this working group for a small country that can still have so many resources to mitigate the climate change, what can I say and what can I do to get more support from the government to invest in blue carbon and in mitigation strategies as well as adaptation?
Thank you for that question. I believe you are speaking to the Honorable Ambassador.
Yes.
On the NDCs.
I don't believe she's... Can you hear me? I'm also exactly asking the same question. What can we do to ask governments to take more serious action on blue NDCs? Some countries have taken leadership. Some 70 countries have done, some have done very well, some have done average, some something. But there are 70 blue components in NDCs today, from mitigation, adaptation, whole works combination. But all countries need to do a lot more. By the time, I hope, through the ocean dialogue and through your work and through building coalitions and alliances, as well as getting more countries as part of our ocean family, that all of them will recognize how important ocean is, how central, but more important, how these forums like this are so important. Some countries may not have thought about their blue component. They will listen to your and my discussion. They will go and look at our NDCs and see if some countries have done it, why not their own countries. So that's the beauty of the COP process, that we share lessons and experiences, and then we try to take it back to see. But overall, we just need to be asking a lot more of our governments, and civil society and individuals, etc., need to be putting a lot more pressure on governments to go much further. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, if I may, I think it's also important to show public policymakers that it works on the ground. So part of what we do is to support projects that definitely, concretely show on the ground it work. And so from this we can show that we can achieve mitigation and adaptation at the same time, for instance with mangroves, seagrasses, but or other nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based approaches. And when you see it, you believe it, and maybe it's easier to bring it into the public policy and NDCs in particular.
Working? Closer, yeah. Yeah, I agree with what the other panelists have said, but I would say that an important thing is talking about quantification and narrative. So being able to link the project that you are intending to work on in blue carbon to broader climate goals. It's really important to be able to quantify how much those will contribute towards those goals. I think that if you look at them purely as environmental projects, it's valuable, but if you're looking at implementing NDCs, knowing exactly what the carbon contribution is, understanding how that's worked in other markets, and then building a strong narrative around how that particular project can help that country get to the NDC, then it helps a lot. That's kind of what I was saying around the overlap between ocean and climate.
If I may add to what the speaker said, I think the key thing is to find the resources financing perspective. And a key point is to find out what the sources of financing are. And you heard about the different sources of financing. And I may just add that the World Bank has a climate investment fund that funds adaptation, risk mitigation, and technology transfer for adaptation and mitigation. It's a $3 billion fund, but it's dispersed through the regional development banks. But you may need a facilitator or to link up with the processors of the regional development banks and yourself. Honorable Prime Ambassador, the same applies to you. So any other question? I suppose it was very clear. Oh, please.
Hello? Yes, I'm Sarah Combs with Global Ocean Trust. And in talking about the funds available, I'm curious what you see on the horizon in terms of commercially viable projects being able to be financed by the private sector, and whether or not that is on the horizon and how quickly you see that. And again, it's a question of being able to show the dynamics of these projects and how viable they are and how successful they are.
Finance is still obviously not the missing part, it is the incomplete part. The technology solutions in the ocean space, the capacities, and all of these things very much exist, as you heard on wind energy. The in two examples from Fiji this year, and we have spoken about it. We are going to the market to issue a blue bond, and we are looking to private investors to support Fiji's efforts at mangrove restoration, at coral reef protection, and at land-based waste management in coastal areas. And within the next 12 months, we will be taking a product to the market. We are in advanced stages of preparation of that facility and the framework, and we are hopeful that we can get it over the line. To get us to the design phase, we have had some technical assistance from UK and a few other friends, but really this is a private sector solution. For a long time, people were saying in small states you don't have scale to go to private sector, and we want to prove them wrong. And I hope in 12 months' time, we can have this conversation, and we'll be demonstrating some modest success. Second is together with the fellow oceanic states, Vanuatu, Marshall Islands, Solomon Islands, and Fiji. We all have some amount of tourism, and tourists move about between our islands on boats and ships. We are all countries of many islands, so people and trade moves between the islands. And individually we are small. All of us are less than 1 million people, and but collectively these four countries have are undertaking a green shipping transition, and we hope to be able to take a collected 4 countries put together project, largely private sector driven, for transition to green shipping in these countries. We have set a high ambition of completing 100% transition by 2030, and the technology solutions seem to be quite impressive. And in the next year and a half, we will shape this, but it looks interesting. So I'm very hopeful that financing solutions are in place. The most frustrating part is that in some of the adaptation efforts, extremely urgent adaptation efforts that we are undertaking, that are direct consequence of climate change and sea level rise, such as relocating our communities in coastal areas as a consequence of sea level rise, we should not have to go to private market to do this, which we are doing. We should not have to tax our own people to fund this, which is what we are doing. But that is a case we are making at COP27 and previous COPs. Not yet winning, but we must get over the line on that as well.
I think you've said the almost everything, but I just want to add that in some cases the private sector also has its interest into these solutions. For instance, in sustainable blue tourism, you have actors that concretely want to move towards sustainable tourism, for instance, and can invest for that because they see what could be the outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there are also real benefits to having nature-based solutions in the private sector space, because that combination of adaptation and mitigation together is fantastic. So, I mean, good examples of things like carbon sinks and the intersection between that and, nascent carbon markets, which are growing very quickly. So the ability to link a nature-based solution project to some sort of carbon market-based financing and carbon credit-based financing is something that we're only seeing the beginning of now, but will definitely be a growing trend as those markets become more stable and more standardized. And yeah, I think that there is already massive investment in the ocean space, right, in maritime and in ocean infrastructure, but making sure that it's clean and it's associated with the NDCs that we want it to be is really the challenge. And I think there is massive momentum for transition, like in shipping. It's just about finding the right technologies and the right intersection between that and innovative blended finance in some cases. So, philanthropic capital in the start to de-risk projects or government grant funding to do the same, and then allowing that to have a pipeline through programs like accelerators and incubators to then move into becoming investable for the private sector.
We're running out of time for this Q&A session, but I just wanted to add that if you wanted to check on the blue bonds, in addition to what the ambassador said, you might want to check the Seychelles blue bond, which is the very first one in the world. That was the very first one. So you could just check blue bond Seychelles, and you'll get that.
All right, thank you all very much. Mr. Ambassador, I know you probably have to run to another negotiations. Thank you, and keep up the great leadership for us. We appreciate it. So we've heard about the importance of government policy, government leadership in implementing ocean-based NDCs. We've heard about the critical role that financing plays in coordinating and supporting those NDCs. And now we're going to shift in our next three speakers to hearing about how collaboration is key as well, because there are inevitably an array of partners and entities that need to come together to work in unison to make these NDCs a reality in the field, or I should say in the ocean. So our first speaker, who will give us an example from the Mid-Atlantic area in the United States, is Mr. Tony McDonald, who's the director of the Urban Coast Institute. His presentation is called Promoting Collaborative Ocean-Based Climate Solutions at the Sub-National and Regional Perspective. Tony, thank you.
Thank you, and I have a choice here. I can either see you or my remarks, so for now I'm going to look at my remarks, I think. But I'm really pleased to be here and actually incredibly excited by the earlier speakers, because a couple of observations. One, if the ambassador was still here, I would thank him very much, because although I've been disengaged personally from some of the international issues, I was in Paris, and at that time the small island developing states were the only ones consistently pushing the oceans issue, and now it's remarkable to me to see how much it is part of the dialogue across the entire discussion. So it really is pretty remarkable. And you're also seeing, I think, a lot of discussion. Jeff and others years ago recognized the importance of working with local communities and thinking about large marine ecosystems and thinking about things in an integrated and holistic way. So my remarks are going to be focused, I think, on that outcome eventually. But I'll start by focusing on the topic for here, which is the NDCs, and recognize we're here for a very specific instrument. And recognize, though, and we've heard already, that does relate to a lot of other instruments, but also it relates to the communities that it's going to impact. So I'm really trying to raise here at this level a recognition that the actions that are taken under this discussions will impact that. That includes a discussion of NDCs. So we've set out very high ambitions. And we've talked a lot about the concept that oceans can be the solution to climate change. So we're talking about taking credit for wind energy and renewable energy, extremely important. We're talking about green shipping, extremely important. Enabling financing. Virtually every announcement this week has been about things related to engaging the private sector and engaging public and private action around some of those kind of actions, and also blue carbon, both along the coastlines particularly. That's where you see most of the attention, but also around concept of marine protected areas and conservation out in the ocean as well. But again, the endpoints for those, in my perspective, is mitigation. And we heard that, I think, from one of the questions. How do you take credit and quantify the mitigation benefits of those actions such that you can achieve the NDCs? Because that's our higher level goal here this week, is to really make sure that we address that issue about mitigation. So I think that is fundamentally important and the fundamental challenge that we're talking about this week. But it has consequences and it has other ramifications that I'm going to try to illustrate through my example in the New York, New Jersey region. So many of you maybe haven't been there, but just envision the reality of what's going on in something like the Mid-Atlantic, highly populated. Last month, it was the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. We've seen the direct impacts of storms. So it's not only storms on small island development states and other remote communities, but also on highly developed communities as well. We have significant hundreds of millions of dollars for the right to develop offshore wind, a lot of resources in developing offshore wind. We have the largest naval weapons station in the world that's based in the Mid-Atlantic. We have significant port activities. So recognize that all of these issues are playing out real time in regions around the world. And my guess is each of us live in a region that it might be scaled up or down, but I'm not sure that the same questions don't come up whether you're addressing these issues in Fiji or the port of Fiji and navigation there, or in a place that's highly developed like the New York, New Jersey region. So again, I think yes, the oceans is the solution, but I want to make sure that as we implement that solution to the mitigation crisis, we are not forgetting that somehow we don't want to become victims of that solution as well. And a little shout out to Steve Whitcomb from Plymouth, because he said something earlier in the week that really has resonated with me. And what he said is, let's remember as we implement all these new technologies, these fine-acting mechanisms, that we've had hundreds of thousands of years of experimenting. The ocean is the most successful already, without any fixing with it, is already the most significant mitigator of climate change, and it's designed to function in a particular way. We need to make sure we get out of the way and we don't interfere with its ability to function efficiently. So let's not forget the environmental and mitigation impacts. And I think this is relation to your question about how do we create credit for the environmental benefits that just are provided by the ocean. They might not be quantified as explicitly within a mitigation scenario, but there's something we need to figure out how to value and make sure that we can enable investments in nature and the environment for its own sake as part of this solution to this problem. So again, I'm here this week in kind of two roles. So one is I am a member of the U.S. National Committee for the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that this week, but recognize there really is opportunities in emerging technologies and science that really can be transformational. We've seen that, and we've heard about that in the context of how fast we've moved on offshore wind and other technologies, but we have that on ocean science and understanding the ocean. So we do need to be remembering that science and data and information committee an important part of any policy solution and need to be integrated in that. So I want to talk about three quick things because I don't have much time. I think I have 3 more minutes to summarize the last 15 years of my career. But I will say I do think that the focus I'm going to talk about is within this mechanism is how do we ensure that there's accountability, transparency, and equity in implementing these ocean solutions. How do we make sure that at the local governance level, we heard the term governance, that we have the policies and legal frameworks in place that assure that as we implement these things, we're not first do no harm. We've heard that in many contexts. We want to be sure not only that we do no harm, but maybe we actually do some good in restoring some of the national features and the national equity that is out there. We do need to think about the data and science and how we can make that available to people. That's a really transformational thing that's happening in everybody's life right now. AI, data, big data, how do we make that available? We really can make that information available so that we can enable all sorts of communities, whether they're remote communities, indigenous communities, educated communities, just your local environmental group. They need to have access to that information just as much as the decision makers have to that information as well. And also, we hear a lot about the need for political will, but I actually think political will is actually a function of public will and public engagement and understanding what those impacts are. So quickly, I'll summarize 3 actions that we're doing in our region that, again, may sound different. We're very different maybe geophysically from your areas, but I think the same features would apply. So I do think you need to think about several things. First of all, we started in our region with regional ocean planning. Before we did that 12 years ago, we started by developing a regional ocean data portal. We gathered all the information in one place that was relevant to planning decisions. We didn't want to be a clearinghouse for every bit of information, but we developed a tool from Virginia to New York that made available to the planners and the public information, and that's been improving over 10 years. So right from the beginning, before we developed our Regional Ocean Action Plan, we developed the information around which, I'm told I have 2 minutes left, and I have 12 more years of my life to summarize. But really, I do think about that from the get-go, really characterizing your resources, and that's the socio and economic as well as the natural resources. We have AIS data from ports. We have all sorts of information. We have over 16,000 layers of data that anybody can access in our region, and you could do the same thing in your region. It's fit for purpose, though. You don't need to do everything, but it needs to fit for the decisions that you need in your community. And then we did develop jointly, I facilitate something called the Mid-Atlantic Council on the Ocean. So I bring together 5 federal agencies that don't always work together well: the Coast Guard, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Energy Management. I bring them together with the 5 state representatives to discuss how they can move forward jointly on developing a regional ocean action plan. So again, we have done that in the region, but that's not the end of the process. It's an ongoing and iterative process. And right now, I just came from a panel earlier on the high-level panel for planning for ocean sustainable economies, ocean economies. It's all integrated coastal management, by the way. It's just sort of reinventing itself around different aspects and applications. So I do think thinking about what your outcomes are and how you engage your communities in those planning efforts so that you have the political and public behind you is very important. And I'll just conclude around the adaptation and resilience issue, because that plays out also in a different way, and recognize that we are seeing, I think, around the world, a recognition that we do need to both respond to communities that are at risk from sea level rise, but also those developed communities that need to figure out how to adapt to that. And in the US anyway, we are starting to see one of the rare bipartisan support for investment in adaptation that will involve both nature-based features and some hard infrastructure from time to time as well. So I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Tony, for sharing an illustrative example of coordination and for your insights as well, your insightful comments. I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Peter Ricketts. He is the president of Acadia University in Nova Scotia. His topic will be promoting ocean-based climate solutions through universities and other academic and research institutions. Peter, it's yours.
Thank you, Rich. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here, and I appreciate very much being invited to speak to you this afternoon. I'm going to have quite a number of slides, which a lot of information on them, and I'm obviously going to go through them very quickly because of the time. And the slides are really there for you to follow up on the Virtual Ocean platform, or to follow up in other ways when you look at the recording of the session, and to provide a little more information than obviously that I can provide in five minutes. But I am at Acadia University. The slide behind me shows a view of our campus looking out towards the Minas Basin, which is at the head of the Bay of Fundy. And out in that water, out there, we have some of the highest tidal range in the world of about 14 to 16 meters in tidal range, and the tide goes out about 5 to 6 kilometers out into the bay. And twice a day, as much water as flows in all the rivers and streams of the world flows beyond that headland that's in the distance there, Cape Blomidon. More water than all the rivers in the world flows twice a day in and out of the Minas Basin. So it's an incredibly dynamic, very high tidal range environment. So I'm going to just talk quickly about collaboration and of universities and institutes, talk a little bit about the IPCC, I'm going to just talk a bit about global ocean universities and institutes around the world, some examples of collaborative climate mitigation and adaptation initiatives. I'm going to look a little closer to our own region in the maritime provinces of Canada, and then also talk about the fact that we also do a lot of programming and a bit of flagrant self-promotion, I guess, with a new program in maritime security that we've developed. So obviously one of the first areas of incredible collaboration of institutes, universities, government organizations, NGOs is the IPCC reports. And of course, if you look at those reports, there are literally thousands of authors, hundreds or maybe thousands of institutes and universities and organizations that have contributed to these incredible reports ever since they started in 1988. And if you look at the one of the more recent ones, particularly, of course, one that's very important to us, the special report on ocean and the cryosphere, just an incredible collaboration of experts from around the world. There were some 569 nominations from 57 countries, over 100 experts from 41 countries, 88 coordinating authors, and you know, more importantly, I think 36% of the selected experts from developing countries. So just those reports by themselves indicate what happens when you have incredible collaboration from academic, scholarly, and government and other organizations from around the world. One of the things I did in terms of thinking about that was, well, you know, where are these institutions and universities? Now, this map is kind of a bit dense from where you're looking, but each of those stars indicates a university that identifies itself as having a strong ocean or coastal theme. And the yellow dots are institutes, which usually maybe not-for-profit institutes. They might be government institutes, or they may be institutes that are in partnership with the university. And each of those stars and circles, you know, has a website attached to it. We're actually going to, I was working with a graduate student at Acadia on this, and we're actually going to turn this into a GIS with an interactive map. We'll put it on the Virtual Ocean Pavilion, because one of the things you notice is the clustering, and some of that clustering is where a lot of the activity is occurring, but we're not picking up a lot of institutions that don't necessarily have that web presence where you can find them. So I think having a map of the world where people could actually add their institution or add their organization that they're working on might be a useful database for all of us. But this is, you know, where we have an incredible opportunity for world collaboration. Also, if you look at examples of collaborative adaptation and mitigation around the world, and this table comes from a paper in the Ocean Yearbook that I did with another undergraduate student at Acadia, but also in the ROCA report from last year, there was a big focus on the mitigation initiatives as well. And so we looked at collaborative initiatives in different ocean regions of the world. And if you look at these, all of them involve collaboration between government, non-government, universities, and institutes. And really, you know, when you think about the complexity of mitigation and adaptation alone, none of those problems can be solved by one perspective. They're multidisciplinary, the solutions are multidisciplinary, and they're multi-institutional, and that's really where you get the most effective impacts of collaboration around the world. If we focus in on the region where I'm from, which is the east coast of Canada, it's called Atlantic Canada, but that includes Newfoundland and Labrador, and then the three maritime provinces of Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. If you just look at our region, of course, it's an incredible coastal region. We're surrounded by oceans and coasts, and the Bay of Fundy, of course, and also the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And the red indicates university initiatives, and the yellow, or the orange, I guess it is, there represents institutes. And so if you look at my university in the middle there, the Acadia University, we have our Coastal Ecology Lab, but also a number of institutes focused around renewable energy, particularly, of course, tidal energy, but also wave and wind energy. We have Dalhousie University, which is one of Canada's 3 ocean universities, the others being Memorial University in Newfoundland and Victoria University, University of Victoria, out on the west coast. And one of the interesting initiatives is the Ocean Frontier Institute, which is a collaboration between Dalhousie, the University of Prince Edward Island, and Memorial University to promote research into all aspects of ocean and coastal that impact, that have innovative potential, and particularly in creative solutions for climate change. And also I want to point out at the University of Prince Edward Island up there, the Canada Centre for Climate Change and Adaptation is being developed, and this is a new initiative by the Government of Canada, which will be open next year, to create centres to promote research on solutions for climate change and adaptation. And then finally, just in a bit of self-promotion, all these universities do a lot of programming, and one of the programs that we're developing is a new professional certificate in maritime security. And it's collaborative between Acadia, between the university, between Irving Shipbuilding and an international accreditor, the International Association of Maritime Security Professionals. And this is kind of programming that I think is going to develop more and more now as we see the impacts of climate change on so many aspects of professional work within the ocean and coastal and maritime sphere. And if you want some more information about that new program, there's some brochures on the table at the back, and I encourage you to look at those. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Great to see scientists becoming more involved in issues. That's really terrific. Now, our next speaker, who will represent the all-important and critical voice of youth and the next generations, is Ms. Ana Maria Marino. She is the Liaison Officer on Arctic and Oceans at the Youth and Environment Europe. Her presentation will be about the role and opportunities for the youth in promoting ocean-based climate solutions. Ana Maria, it's yours. Thank you. Sorry. You want your picture up there?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here, and I'm very honored to be able to talk a little bit about the role and the opportunities for young people in promoting and participating in ocean-based climate solutions. Well, I'm here, first of all, not only on behalf of Youth and Environment Europe, but also on behalf of the Youth for Ocean Forum. I am a member of the Youth for Ocean Forum since 2021, but it's a project that started 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago. I think that it's a very good example of how can we collaborate at the regional level among different stakeholders by also working intergenerationally and including youth. So since by now we all talked about how important, and we know how important it is to talk about collaboration and partnerships to raise climate ambition also through ocean-based solutions. I think that, yeah, it's worth talking about our project. First of all, the Youth for Ocean Forum is a European community of young ocean advocates, project leaders, activists, scientists, but also artists and communicators. We come together to take action, to take lead, and also to help create a more sustainable ocean that can sustain us all. The Youth for Ocean Forum has now 300 plus members who are scattered all around Europe. And we also have one honorary envoy who is the European Commissioner on Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virginijus Sinkevicius. The forum was designed according to the vision of young founders, so it was designed and organized according to the needs of youth. And it is now a community across Europe that gives opportunity to young people to develop their own projects and to be supported in doing that. This network also works towards a youth-to-youth approach, which means that we can learn from each other because we come from so many different fields, but it is also based on the Young Ocean Advocate program. The Young Ocean Advocate program is a training and also a mentorship program with which project leaders who have exactly an idea or an already developed project in the field of ocean literacy and ocean conservation can be supported by experts in different fields, of course, tailored to the needs of the young person, of the young project leader. This happens thanks to the fact that Youth for Ocean Forum is part of a wider community, which is a community of different stakeholders, which is called the EU for Ocean Coalition. And the EU for Ocean Coalition works in 3 communities. One is the community of different stakeholders, experts, research institutes, and universities, and scientists, of course, but also people, different people. And on the other hand, we have educators and schools, the blue schools. And the third community is, of course, the Youth for Ocean Forum. So we managed to get support and expertise from all of the members of this coalition. But why am I saying that? I'm saying that because I want to talk about how important it is to have collaboration not only among different stakeholders but also among different generations. And what we do is not only to develop ocean literacy projects to raise awareness about ocean and climate issues, but also we develop advocacy at the international level. We were able to bring a delegation of young members to COP26 last year, and we work a lot with storytelling. Storytelling is really part of our methods, and I think that it's really something that brings different generations together. So that's why we also developed workshops to explore how to best set narratives about the ocean and what we can do for the ocean. But allow me to also expose a few messages from the conclusions of our youth event last 10th of November. We hosted it on the Virtual Ocean Pavilion. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that let's set up more opportunities to work intergenerationally, because I think that we have shown that as young people, we are first in line when it comes to raise awareness in our societies, in our communities, and to mobilize our communities to convince our leaders to raise ambition. So I think that we are a key actor as young activists to raise ocean climate ambition, and of course to raise the ambition of the leaders in implementing new and more ambitious targets in their NDCs. And also I would like to remark that too often the implementation of youth projects, also adaptation projects at the local level, is met with many practical obstacles. They're often linked to capacity and of lack of funding and expertise. So please trust us with the implementation of local solutions by collaborating with us, by providing us more expertise, technical capacity, and the network connections that we need to implement those local projects. By listening to us, but also by focusing on developing a better and more intergenerational collaboration so that we can learn from each other. We learn from you, but you also learn from us, and we can raise ambition together. So I think that this is because although many initiatives already exist, for instance, in the framework of implementation of SDG 14, with ocean literacy being part of it, for instance, but what I think that we are only scratching the surface of what would be needed to effectively implement ocean climate solutions in an inclusive way. And last thing that I would like to say is that we would also like to have more access to formal channels of power and decision making, as young people know and are the first one who know how important it is to act now and to be ambitious in our climate targets, because we know that we don't get second chances in dealing with the climate crisis. So we have a vision, we know how to do this, but please let us be in the conversation on how to do this, because we all agree that we have to act, but we have to also discuss inclusive ways to do that, by instance, including young people, civil society, local communities, indigenous communities, for instance, in adaptation solutions. So my final message is help us to help you to raise climate ambition and also implement more ambitious solutions and targets in the context of ocean NDCs. So we can do that. We can do that with collaboration, which is a buzzword in this event. Sorry for repeating it so many times, but we can do it with intergenerational collaboration, which is another buzzword that I would like to you to keep in your mind. So thank you.
I really like intergenerational cooperation. That's a terrific concept, and it's going to stay right here. Thank you, Anna Maria, for really honest, sincere, inspiring, passionate, hopeful, all kinds of good things, remarks. We need a lot more of that these days. So thank you, and thank you for the panelists for staying on time. We've allowed, as we hoped, a few minutes for a Q&A from the audience. So I think there's a microphone going around, and I'll ask for, I see a hand right here. Oh, the mic's going over there first. I'll come right back to you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Ahmed Abari from Nigeria. I work for the government. I would like a kind of reflection on the benefit of collaboration between the academia and the government, especially in achieving the desired goals. Secondly, I also want to inquire if the course on maritime security that was presented by the Vice Chancellor of the Acadia University is contained in the model of the International Ship and Port Security Code, the ISPS code of the International Maritime Organization, so that we could see how we could partner with the institution on providing capacity for our officers. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that question. I think, Peter, we'd ask you to respond.
Yeah, thanks very much for both of those questions. I think the collaboration between universities and government is hugely important. And in many ways, I think governments need to rely on universities to a large extent for the expertise and knowledge that they need to develop policies and to develop approaches that are based upon science and based upon reality. And I think one of the things that I've often found is that when governments try and do things alone, obviously different governments have certain research capacities, and some have more than others. But very often the expertise in these areas, particularly when it comes to climate change, but also if you think about issues like integrated coastal zone management, as I mentioned earlier, where the solutions are multidisciplinary, multifaceted, very complex. The expertise for resolving those solutions usually lies outside of government, and very often in universities, not exclusively, but also in other institutes and also in non-governmental organizations and community organizations. So I think it's really important for governments to recognize that there is a wealth of expertise outside of government agencies which need to inform those decisions. And vice versa, universities need to be more engaged with being willing to work with government, work with industry, and work with other partners to help them make more informed decisions. So it's very much a two-way street. In terms of your question on maritime security, so our professional partnership is with the International Association of Maritime Security Professionals, and they do have certain links, but I'd be very interested to hear about your organization and see if we could link in with that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Tony, would you like to add to that?
I just want to add that, again, I work at a university, but I'm a lawyer, but I work adjacent to scientists, and I'm, as I mentioned, on this U.S. National Committee for the UN Decade. And I guess I want to add just another perspective in addition to that, which is I do think that particularly in the ocean data world and information world, if we're talking about NDCs and we're realizing that there's going to be wind companies and private investments, and we need to be thinking about how we collect data in ways that maybe isn't based on the traditional academic research model. So I do think, in addition to your academic institutions, first of all, I do think the nature of research might be changing a little bit from some of the traditional. I think the impact on what are the societal benefits. A lot of the younger generations of scientists and the youth folks are actually coming up with a different training that maybe some of us did. The hierarchical way you get tenured in an academic institution might be, different. So I would say there's an opportunity there also to think about how you, as governance society, bring in questions and how you fund your research in partnership with that, and also make sure that you're thinking about how do you get data from other sources, because it might not only be from academic research. So again, how you frame your questions might be very different depending on the community that you're at. So I think the concept of experts might be breaking down a little bit to think that maybe you might know more than you already think you know about things. At least you know how to form the questions. And if the academic institutions can align around that a little bit more clearly, that might be useful.
Thank you, Tony. I know we have one more question down front. Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to say to Ana Maria, I think that's such an amazing work that you're doing. We're part of Sustainable Ocean Alliance, and we're doing the same kind of work that you do in Latin America, so it's truly inspiring what you do. But one of the biggest challenges that we have, I don't know if you have them as well in Europe, is trying to make this science-based solution and research. We're all biologists, and trying to make research is so hard, and you both were saying how the first step has to be research, doing all the knowledge of what we have so that then we can make the action plan. It's very challenging to do, especially when there's not that much financing in Latin America. They do not give us money to make only scientific research. So we always have to implement something extra, something social, something political, something extra, and we cannot do pure science initiatives. So what would you recommend for us to make the most with the resources that we have as young ocean activists, because we do want to promote science, but then the financing doesn't allow us to only do science. So what can we do about it?
Anna Maria, do you want to respond?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your comments, and I completely agree. I think it's a really important challenge, and like I was saying before, it's important to bring people from different fields together, but also to develop your own project and your own research if you need to. And I think that there has to be more trust in the way in which financing happens towards young people like you. So I think it's a real challenge, and we hope that this will be, that this is not in my hands because we have the same challenges. But for sure, what works for us is to have this community that does not only have scientists and researchers, but also that has people that then work on the more social and storytelling and communication part. But I still believe that there has to be this gap, this financing gap has to be addressed if you want to conduct pure research. So yeah, I hope for the best.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Okay, so we have just exactly 5 minutes before we need to conclude, and I'd like to ask Dr. Indu Hiwawasana to come up and speak about, or offer 2 or 3 minutes of her summary comments and reflections on today's excellent presentations. Indu, thank you.
Thank you, Rich. And thank you for all the participation and the interaction. It was very, very useful to us and to all of you, I believe. We talked about quite a few topics. We talked about the NDCs, we talked about the partnerships, interlinkages between ecosystems, and finally, and not last but not least, the youth that, as Anna Maria said, help us to help you. And obviously the future belongs to the youth, so we all have to be partners in this exercise. I just wanted to mention the importance of partnerships with the research universities, the policy-based universities, the NGOs, the private sector, and governments in carrying this, in implementing these climate action programs, adaptation or mitigation. So there's often a need for facilitation and in partnerships, in taking this agenda forward. So I would mention that, the Global Ocean Forum, which is a partner in organizing this event, the Ocean Pavilion, and other partners too, we can play a role in catalyzing. For instance, the Global Ocean Forum has experience in convening power, the awareness raising, the capacity building, and partnerships. So you may need some organizations such as ours. I'm not really selling ourselves, but we are there to help you. I mean, it's a partnership that we need, between different actors, with the regional, with the national, with the local, private, NGO community. We all have to join in this effort because it's a very important as well as complex initiative. So with that, I hand over to Richard to give the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Indu. And I will just conclude by, of course, thanking our expert panelists for stimulating remarks, thanking you for your questions, thanking all of our partners who were identified at the beginning of the presentation. But I also want to note that many of those same partners have collaborated on producing a virtual ocean pavilion. And if you're not aware of that now, just Google Virtual Ocean Pavilion. It's a service that the Global Ocean Forum has led people to create, and it will provide a review of the panel today and many, many more assets. We have a resource library, we have speakers, we have a number of things on that. It's a richly populated, very well-documented website. Please take advantage of it. It will be up and live as the Virtual Ocean Pavilion, VOP, all the way through the end of the year. So please take advantage of that. And thank you, lastly, for the work you do. We have a bunch of experts up here, but I have a feeling we could have brought any 6 of you people in the audience up and put you in these chairs, and you would have been able to speak about all the wonderful work you're doing. Peter mentioned the IPCC. I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Hans Otto Portner, right over here, who co-authored and led many of those documents. And here he is sitting with us, the people, just as a regular guy. So that's what it takes, all of us together doing everything we can, and thank you for doing what you've done. Thank you for being here today. The session is finalized. Goodbye.